Have you ever thought about podcasting? Today is a little bit of a meta episode, a podcast episode about podcasting and how it can be a super powerful tool for marketing your business. Today, I'm talking with Sarah Noel Block, who's the founder of Tiny Marketing and the creator of the Lean Marketing Engine. I asked her to come on the show because I'm actually a huge fan of her podcast. We are friends, but I listen to her podcast religiously. It's called Tiny Marketing. And her podcast is just super chock full of practical tips, very actionable, very digestible, and it's just really a joy to listen to. I know that Sarah talks a lot about how her podcast acts as her anchor for all of her other content marketing. And so I thought that it would be really great to hear from her and how she's built her podcast, what she recommends for people who are considering just getting started with podcasting. And I thought for you, my listeners, this would be a really useful, practical topic if you've ever thought about starting a podcast. All right, let's dive in. Hey there, beautiful human. Welcome to the Bold Women in Business podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Honeyman, a content marketing, branding, and web design expert and founder of Honey Be Bold. This show is all about helping you build the most successful and fulfilling business possible so you can make a bigger impact in the world. Let's dive in. So there are so many things we can all be doing for our content marketing, right? Where there's like it feels like this endless stream of things that we could be investing in. What do you think makes podcasting such a powerful tool, especially for service-based entrepreneurs? I think that a lot of people feel a little bit intimidated by podcasting. What's your take on podcasting?
I have a lot of takes. The first thing is podcasting is probably the easiest one to get started in because all you really need is a phone. Jenna Kutcher, for example, she recorded her first couple of years of her podcast from her phone in her car. It's low hassle. You can do it anywhere. And you don't have to be on video. You don't have to do a video podcast. You don't have to sit down and write. You just have to talk. And then the other thing is it's so intimate. That's the reason that it works so well. You're living in someone's ears. I have so many people coming to my sales calls saying, I feel like I already know you because I listen to your podcast. And I think that makes a huge difference because I've already earned that know, like, trust with them at scale.
Yeah, it's so true. I knew you before I started listening to your podcast, but then I'm a big fan of your podcast. So this is a plug for Sarah's podcast, Tiny Marketing. It's a great one to listen to. But yeah, I think it's so true. You just build this really deep understanding and connection with your audience in a way that you really can't just through writing posts on LinkedIn or however else you're connecting with people.
Yeah, when you're hearing someone's voice and it's like in your AirPods, it's a whole different experience than them feeling so far removed from you.
Yeah. And you kind of skipped ahead to a question that I had later, which was kind of what is the minimum setup that someone needs? I think a lot of people think that you need this very fancy setup. And I will say I have upgraded my tech for season 2 of my podcast. Ooh. I now have a $17 mic here.
And I like the lights.
It changes colors. And I think my camera also was something like $17 to $20. And these headphones were also probably no more than $30. So definitely you don't need a lot. And I think that is something that people have that misconception that you need all the fancy gear.
Yeah, you really don't. It can be super easy. You can start with AirPods and a phone. You don't even need a computer for it.
Yeah.
You should hear my early episodes. I don't know if you swear on this show, but they were complete shit.
Yeah. You can swear all you want.
It sounded like I was recording in a tin can, but you got to start somewhere or you'll never start. Who cares if it's perfect? You will get better every time you do it.
Yeah.
And this mic was like a huge game changer for me. It turned me from my tin can to like sounding like I'm on NPR.
So yeah, it really makes a huge difference. And I've even noticed a big difference with upgrading to this $17 mic. I'm like, oh, like the sound quality is much, much better. And so you don't need to spend a ton of money, but obviously the more you grow your podcast, it eventually will make sense to invest a little bit, but you don't need to.
Yeah, I think I've given myself a little like podcast gifty every season.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
now we're gonna get a better light setup because we're gonna do video.
Yeah, I love that. When do you think it makes sense for someone to start a podcast? Like, is there a certain level of success that you need to reach before you start a podcast? Do you need a certain size audience in terms of where you are at in business, your other systems, and your other content marketing? When does a podcast make sense as an add-on?
I would go a little broader on that. And instead of just podcasts, let's say a signature series where you're doing a thing on a regular basis. And I think that you can start that right away. You don't need an audience. When I started Tiny Marketing, the very first day I started it is when I started my show, which was a live stream show at the time. And I had no audience. Nobody knew who I was, but I just kept showing up and inviting my marketing crushes to the show. And that's what built my audience. So you need a reason for people to find you or a way for people to find you in the first place. So don't wait till you have an audience because you aren't going to get one unless you put yourself out there.
Yeah, you always talk about, I think it was your first paid workshop that you ran and one person showed up or something
Yeah.
like that. And I think that a lot of us get very intimidated by this idea that, well, I'm going to put all this effort into something and no one's going to see it or listen to it.
They're
Well,
not going to at first, maybe.
yeah.
Okay.
And I think that it's also really interesting to see. I'm seeing this as my podcast listener base is growing. I mean, when I first launched it, I had 3 listens on my first episode and I was probably 2 of them, right? Like it's really you don't have anyone listening to it, but as you kind of build your audience, well, now people are going back and listening to those first episodes, right?
Yes.
So you have this content there to be consumed when people are ready to consume it.
It stacks. Exactly. It stacks. So people might not have listened to it when it first came out. I'm pulling up my Buzzsprout right now because I want to show you just how ridiculous my numbers were at the beginning. Okay, 5. I had 5 downloads my first month podcasting.
Love it. Love it.
And now I'm averaging about 5,000.
Wow. That's incredible. That's really, really incredible.
People might not notice right away, but they will over time. I would just create a library with it, knowing that I'm probably not going to get a ton of people tuning in the second it downloads, but eventually people are going to catch on, especially if you do this with co-marketing or partnerships where you have an interview style show. That makes it a lot easier because you're amplifying your reach. That other person on the show is also sharing it out. And eventually you'll get better at like creating those little content babies from your anchor content too. And that drives more people to that anchor.
Yeah, exactly. I think that that's such a key thing is understanding that the content that you create is not just a one and done. It shouldn't be, right? You shouldn't just create content and then put it out into the world and sit back and hope that people see it. Now you have fodder for additional content that will come from that.
Yes.
And you can always point people back to it later, something that is always there to sit in your ecosystem.
Yeah. As my visibility has grown and people reach out to me asking questions, I've started just referring back to episodes, like go to episode 120. I talk about exactly the strategy here and share it with them. I'll use my podcast episodes that are older as like bonus content that goes with a course that just aligns really well with it and gives them a little something extra. So you can use it in lots of different ways.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about how podcasting can lead to direct client conversions. And I know you've been podcasting for quite a while now. Is it 4 years?
Let's see. Yeah, October 2021. I still have the stats pulled up.
Okay. So yeah, coming up on 4 years. So how long did it take for you to see those direct conversions from your podcast?
So it started with the relationships I built through podcasting, the interviews that I've had, and the people I met through podcasting. So those were within the first year. I started to get clients that way. And then it progressed. And as I grew, it became more of a nurturing tool. And people who discovered me through some other platform then would want to listen to my show, and that would nurture them and they would lead to a sale. And now it's big enough that it's a discoverability tool and people are finding me that way. But it took years for it to be a direct discovery tool. For a
Mhm.
long time, it was first relationships that I built through it, and then second, nurturing.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that totally makes sense that one core channel can really morph over time, right? It's going to serve different
Yeah.
purposes at different times. As your business grows, it's going to change with your business. It should. And so that totally makes sense. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this short break. Quick question, fellow female entrepreneur. Is your messaging actually doing its job? Attracting the right people and making them stop in their tracks and say, wow, I must work with her. And most importantly, getting them to actually take action on that. If you're making a not so sure face right now, then it's time for a messaging glow up. My free mini course, 3 Days to Bold Messaging That Converts, will help you refine your messaging so you can attract more of those clients you dream about without second guessing every word you write. Oh, and did I mention you'll get personalized feedback from me too? Yep, all for free. Snag your spot at honeybeebold.com/free. That's honeybeebold.com/FREE. And let's make your messaging work for you instead of against you. All right, let's get back to the episode. Let's talk about some ways that people can really use a podcast to drive leads and sales. If that is someone's ultimate goal, what do you recommend for them?
I did a masterclass on this, so I'll talk about exactly what I talked about in that. I'm actually speaking at a conference live this weekend and talking about this topic too.
Okay, so we're getting the sneak peek.
Yeah, you're getting a sneak peek. So what has worked really well for me is having some sort of activation event. I always call it an active lead generator that I lead people to through the podcast. So I'll do a series of 3 to 5 episodes on that topic. And each one is just like bite-sized learning bits about what I'll dive deeper into in the paid workshop or the masterclass. And I'm always prompting people to sign up for that. So that gives me an opportunity to move people down the funnel naturally by getting them interested and intrigued about that topic and wanting to dive in deeper. So that's how I'm getting them to that live event and on my email list. It's worked really easily. And now I've added a couple other things to it where I'll have ads on my own podcast for my own offers, and that leads people to it, and campaigns too. So when I'm doing a launch or a push for the Tiny Marketing Club, for example, I'll do a series on that with like frequently asked questions, what you can expect inside, anything that you would put in like an email launch sequence, I'll do a podcast about. And that drove a ton of leads for the Tiny Marketing Club when I was doing a Black Friday launch.
Yeah, I think that ads for your own offerings is really, really smart. It's something that I am now playing around with on this season of the podcast, but I think it's something that a lot of people don't think of, right? Because they think of having ads, oh, you have to find sponsors to pay you money to be on your podcast. And that's not necessarily what everyone wants on their podcast, right? It's a different experience when you have sponsored ads. I think it's a good option for many, many podcasts, but it's not necessarily what everyone wants.
I agree. Whether you have ads or not, or whether you're promoting someone else's product or not, all depends on your goal. Is the goal of your podcast to grow your service offering? Then you should probably stick to you and make sure that your offer is the star of the show throughout the podcast. And that's going to give you a much bigger ROI than the couple $100 you're going to get from that sponsor.
Yeah, I think that especially for podcasts that are just starting out, or you don't have a huge audience yet, you're unlikely to get these $10,000 sponsorships to begin with. So
yeah, I have had plenty of sponsors and none of them have paid me $10,000.
Yeah, exactly. If you could give just one piece of advice to a business owner thinking about starting a podcast, what would it be?
It would be to choose an awesome hook, because the hook is what pulls people in. Think about it like social media. That first line that you put in your post, that's what draws them in. And having that kind of hook for your podcast is what intrigues people. I am launching a side podcast called The Bestseller Experiment.
Cool.
And it's diving into like book marketing strategies and testing them and then letting you know like the real world results of them. So I think that that is a unique angle. Like we're experimenting. You could watch me go down in flames in real time. How exciting is that?
Yes, super exciting. We are a culture of voyeurism.
Yeah.
So love it. I know because you've had your podcast for quite a while, I know that you've experimented with a lot of different formats at this point. Video versus audio, some interview episodes. I know this past summer you ran this series
Yeah.
where you were sharing replays of workshops that you've done. What have you found people respond best to? I guess also different lengths of shows. What do you find people respond best to?
You know what? I'm going to pull up my stats by episode and
Show
tell
me
you.
show me the receipts.
Okay, so in my most recent episodes, the shorties have been doing really well. I'm just looking at the ones since December.
Nice.
So, like ones that are less than 30 minutes are getting more views, and those are solo episodes. So, it might be because of that.
Interesting.
So, I have found a couple different, I mean, this one's an hour and a half. It only has 10 less than the shorties. But what I've noticed is the format hits people at different phases of the funnel. At the top of funnel, the discovery phase, interview style ones have done really well. It brings new people into my world and just the SEO of it too, because they're seeing those names of the people that are familiar to them. So they start listening to my show. So I would say interview style is top of funnel. Going to bring that in. The solo episodes are definitely more mid funnel because they're hearing more like from me, my expertise, and I'm usually leading them to some sort of thing, whether that's a club or a masterclass, something like that. And then the remix series, it was called the Uncut Summer series that I did. That one was very like more of a nurturing type of content format. People really loved it. They were all long, like hour and a half episodes because the idea was to give you like the raw, unfiltered interviews, the mess ups, the laughs, the everything. And I think people like seeing that behind the scenes realness.
Yeah.
So I got a lot of emails about that. So I am still playing with a whole bunch of different formats because I just don't like fitting in a box. And I'm going to continue.
With you. And actually that's something that's so interesting about the uncut series, because that's something I've noticed in some other podcasts that I listen to more recently. People are editing much less. There's some editing happening, but people are leaving it a little bit more raw. And I have a feeling that people just like that. You know, it's the same way on social media, right? We prefer videos that look like they were shot on someone's phone and it looks like it's off the cuff and it's really natural and raw. We prefer that much more than the polished, you know, well edited videos that a lot of people used to post, right? But that's not really what people respond to anymore.
No, I have been asked a couple of times to like talk about trends in articles. And the thing that I always go to is people are craving that real rawness, less editing, less production. It's because of AI, I think, because everything is so polished with AI. They just want to know you're real and what you're doing is real and you're like a fallible human. Where we connect with people. So that's just so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that you mentioned AI, let's hear how AI plays a role in your podcasting.
I love AI. So you're inside of the club, the Tiny Marketing Collection. So you've probably seen some of the tools that I've built. I build my own AI tools and train them so they sound like me. So I use my podcast as my anchor content, but I edit it using Descript, which AI does a lot of the heavy lifting for me. It does the studio sound, it levels everything, it'll do the cuts for me. So that saves me a ton of time and money because I was paying someone to do it for me.
Yeah.
And then Buzzsprout, I almost said a different company name, Buzzsprout. It has an AI like description generator. So I use that and it creates its own chapters. And then I created my own bots to create articles and show notes pages based off of my transcripts, making sure that it matches my voice, how I sound, and it's in the format that I like. So that's how I'm able to do so much in 4 hours on a Monday morning.
Yeah, that is one of the coolest things that you talk about is that Monday morning marketing. For my listeners who are not familiar with that, it's you spend 4 hours every Monday just doing your whole week's content,
Yeah.
right?
And then I'm done.
Yeah, yeah, which is super cool. I have not mastered that yet, but I will. I'll get
You'll
there.
get there.
So you mentioned the Tiny Marketing Club a couple of times. Tell us about the Tiny Marketing Club and where people can find you.
Yeah. So if you go to sarahnoelblock.com/club, you'll find all the info on it, but it's a hybrid experience where it's a huge training center with 13, I think right now, courses on every element of my framework. And then you get me too in your back pocket. So I am DM coaching with you. We have our Monday morning marketing where we're marketing together and office hours. So you can come in, get feedback on your work, ask those personalized coaching questions that you have, and really dig in deep. And it all starts with a one-to-one strategy. So you know exactly what you should be creating because one size does not fit all. The framework looks different depending on the person.
Yeah.
So we build that out. What does this framework look like for you first?
Right. Right. Yeah. And it's, I think, one of the most underrated pieces of running a business is being part of communities like that. I think it's such a huge piece of learning from others, learning from experts like you, and getting the support that you need, and connecting with other people who are going through similar challenges and
Yeah.
who really understand what you're dealing with. So yeah, I highly recommend anyone listening definitely check out the Tiny Marketing Club. Definitely check out Sarah's podcast. It's worth a listen. Don't be afraid to start your own podcast. Obviously, this is a very meta topic. We're recording a podcast about podcasting, which I'm all for. But it's really, I think, something that anyone can start. One other thing that I wanted to mention is something that I talk about a lot with my clients is really finding the methods of connecting with your audience that really speak to you. So podcasting isn't for everyone, right? Like if someone really hates speaking, it's probably not for them, right? But it does open a door for someone who, let's say, hates writing, right? And that piece is just really overwhelming for them. Well, this is just a much more casual way of connecting with your audience.
I always talk about like identifying your magic first and then deciding what that anchor content should be. If you love writing, awesome. You should create a public newsletter to get that visibility out there and write your heart out. If you love speaking, podcasting could be good for you. If you're super charismatic on video, do a video show. But you don't have to do the same thing as me or Rachel or anybody else. Do what works for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your expertise. And I'll see you in Tiny Marketing Club. Maybe it's just me, but I kept thinking throughout that conversation that podcasting is perfect for the voice noters amongst us, right? And that's actually kind of why I started this podcast myself, is even though I'm a writer at heart and I love writing, I tend to have a much easier time getting my thoughts out in a kind of quick, succinct way when I'm sending a voice note. If a friend asks me for something and it just takes a lot more time for me to gather my thoughts and write them out than it does for me to hit record and just send them a quick voice note. If you're a podcast listener, you're probably not annoyed by voice notes. I know there are a lot of people who are annoyed by them, but I think that what Sarah and I talked about kind of at the end of that conversation was really key when it comes to what I'm talking about here, which is you need to find the thing that you love. And when we think about creating anchor content that then forms the basis of the rest of your content marketing ecosystem, it doesn't have to be podcasting, right? If that's not your thing, that's totally fine. Not everyone likes to hear themselves speak, and that's not the way that you process information and get your thoughts out. That's totally fine. If it is something that you find yourself drawn to, if you're a voice noter, there is no reason you can't also be a podcaster. And so I'm only bringing this up because I want you to really not be intimidated by the thought of starting a podcast. I first thought about starting a podcast probably about a year before I actually did it. And I really regret it, honestly. I wish that I had started it earlier because it's been such a learning experience for me. It's been such a great way to form deeper connections with people. And I think what Sarah said about it being this more intimate connection with my audience is so true. So I do regret not starting it earlier, but I'm glad that I started it when I did. And the biggest thing though, when I finally started it was I said, F it. I'm just going to start. And I didn't have fancy equipment. I didn't really know what I was doing. I'm an avid podcast listener. So there was a lot of things that I learned from the podcast that I listened to and the things that I respond to that played a role in how I structured this podcast and allowed me to learn as much as I could. But I didn't really know what I was doing. And you don't have to know what you're doing either. That's basically my biggest message to you is you don't have to know what you're doing. You just have to start. And so if podcasting isn't the thing that speaks to you as a way to grow your business, grow your audience, that's totally fine. You need to find the thing that is going to form the anchor for the rest of your content marketing ecosystem. What's important is that you have a content marketing ecosystem, right? We want to make sure that you're not just posting content randomly, that you're, posting inconsistently, that you're posting just for the sake of posting or because someone told you that you need to be posting. You have limited time and resources, and you just don't have time to be putting effort into things that aren't going to pay off. And you don't have time to be putting effort into things that aren't strategic in how they drive your business goals forward. I know this because I am you. I am a small business owner with a teeny tiny team, and I'm doing most of this myself, right? I do have support. I have a great team, but most of Honey Be Bold is run by yours truly. So I know that struggle of not having unlimited time and resources to put your effort into a million different things or put your effort into things that are random or not strategic, right? So that's really the key is we want to make sure that you have a very strategic content marketing ecosystem that is designed to help you move your business goals forward. If you're struggling with how to build that content marketing ecosystem, if you are interested in starting a podcast, but you don't know how, these are things that I am more than happy to chat with you about, help you strategize, help you find the right approach for you and your business. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time. All right, beautiful human. That's it for today's show. This show is brought to you by my company, Honey Be Bold, with music by Shmookalele. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe on your podcast listening platform of choice. And if you can take 5 seconds to rate and review us, it really helps the show grow. And before you go, if you're struggling to attract and convert your dream clients, be sure to check out my free mini course, 3 Days to Bold Messaging That Converts, and you'll get personalized feedback from me on how to nail your messaging every time. Head on over to honeybebold.com/free. That's honeybebold.com/FREE to sign up. Thanks for listening.